Right on. All right. Well, thank you, Faye, and thanks for keeping me on track. Let's start with Jacqueline Homan. Would you care to introduce yourself?
I'm Jacqueline Homan, and you can follow me on Twitter at Jacqueline Homan.
Thank you. Jeremy.
Hi, this is Jeremy. I'm coming at you from St. Louis, Missouri. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeremy Sammons1. That is JereMySammons and the number 1.
Thank you, Jeremy. Faye Koo.
Hi, I am at Palestine Math because I live in Palestine, Texas, which is rural East Texas. So nice to meet you.
Faye Doney.
Hello, yes, my name is Faye, and you can find me on Twitter at Disdonn. That's Tisdoney.
Thank you. Ariel.
Yeah, I'm Ariel. You can find me on Twitter at Ariels_Armada. YouTube is Revolutionary Thinking, and I just changed my Instagram name to Ariels_Ariels. So that's ARIELS_AERIALS. Those are where I post my awesome drone photos.
Thank you. Did you say you were in LA? Did you mention that?
Yeah, I
Okay.
live in Los Angeles.
Good. And I live in New York, not the city, but about 90 minutes north. My name is Shale, and I produce and edit this 4 or 5 times a weekend. And it's because there's nothing that will help me and everyone I care about in the world more than a basic income. I think we all kind of feel that way. So here we are. I said, did we let you introduce yourself? Would you like to say anything about yourself, Jessie?
Sure. I'm coming from Hamilton, Ontario, the city just west of Toronto. And I'm a photographer and a classical pianist, and I'm excited to be here to talk about basic income.
And you had received a basic income.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the pilot program. It was phenomenal, and that's what got you involved.
Yeah, I was part of that basic income pilot. I knew a little bit about basic income beforehand. But mostly just like random articles on Reddit and stuff like that. But no, I hadn't actually learned more about it until I was on the pilot. So yeah, I got about $700 a month from the government until there was a new government. I don't know. Do you know the whole story of that?
I think you should share the story for everyone to hear.
Yeah, please. I'm sure I don't have the whole picture.
Okay. So my personal story is that before I was on basic income, I had 4 jobs, and it was all gig economy jobs, like minimum wage, contract work, no benefits. Any of these jobs could be ended at a moment's notice for no reason, so no protections either. And it was a really stressful existence. I was probably working 60 to 80 hours a week on average, and it was really just very, very stressful. So then I heard about this basic income pilot. I was just, on my phone, browsing Facebook or whatever it was. I saw this article from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, the CBC, saying that they were doing this basic income pilot. And, if you resided in Hamilton and made less than $30,000 a year, you can apply. And I was like, hey, I reside in Hamilton. I make less than $30,000 a year. So let's do it. So I signed up, and it was basically you had to live in either Hamilton, another city called Lindsay, which is about 3 hours east of Hamilton, and another city called Thunder Bay, which is about 17 hours north of Hamilton. It's a very big province. Canada is a very large country. And so if you had to reside in one of those cities, and they would pick 4,500 people out of everybody who applied. And those 4,500 people would get the basic income, and then the other people who applied would be a control group, and both groups would fill out surveys. So that's how the pilot was to work. If you are a single person, you can make up to $1,400 a month on this pilot. But if you were working, then that amount would be subtracted by 50 cents to the dollar. So I was working, so I made $700 a month on basic income, which covered my rent, which was fantastic. It didn't cover a lot of anything else. I still had other bills to pay. I have a car. I need to pay for food. It just covered my rent, but then it gave me that motivation to work. So then I started working and focusing entirely on my photography business because that's all I wanted to do, just be a full-time photographer. And I was seeing my business grow. In fact, because I had that more time to put into my business, I was actually making more money doing photography than I was in all of those multiple gig jobs that were like super precarious. The pay was awful, and I was still poor every month. And then I was like seeing it grow, and I was developing a business plan. The pilot was supposed to be 3 years, and I would have only been on the pilot for 2 out of the 3 years, because at that point I would have been making enough money that I wouldn't have needed to be on the pilot anymore. But yeah, so that pilot was put forward by a Liberal government, and the Premier of Ontario at the time was a woman named Kathleen Wynne, and it was her pilot and her idea. But then there was an election. The Liberal government got completely decimated, and now it's a Conservative government. The Premier of Ontario is a man named Doug Ford. You may know his brother, Rob Ford, as the crack-smoking mayor of Toronto.
I forget.
Yeah, one of Canada's proudest moments. So he's the Premier of Ontario, his brother is, and his brother is just as bad as Rob. He'd gone on the record. He had said numerous times, I won't cancel the basic income if I were to become premier, blah, 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 blah. But of course, the very first thing he did when he became premier is cancel the basic income pilot.
Disgusting.
Yeah, and I was furious. Hell hath
As
no
well
fury.
you should be.
Oh, I can't remember being that angry in a long time. And that's where the portrait series got born, was that anger, because I was just like,
Yeah.
want him to know what he did. I want everybody to know these people. I'm going to take their pictures. I'm going to find these people. I'm going to tell their stories. So I just started finding people, and then the stories, like, it kind of grew. It started to take a life of its own. Like as the stories and the pictures started rolling in, more people wanted more photos. People in Thunder Bay paid to fly me all the way up to Thunder Bay to take photos. I got to go to Lindsay and take photos. So I've made all these friends in the movement, and the portraits have just they've taken me on some strange adventures. They've been exhibited all across Canada. I now give lectures in universities. I exhibited the photos last year at the North American Basic Income Congress in New York City, and I also exhibited at the Basic Income Earth Congress in India. This year I was supposed to exhibit, I was going to do a new portrait series and find other basic income recipients and exhibit that in Australia. That's actually where I met Faye Donn.
Nice.
Oh, I didn't know you guys were acquainted. That's cool.
Yep, we met before, and for obvious.
I've been on her podcast.
How did you get to Australia, Faye? What in the world? Jet setting.
We're not going to Australia now.
Oh,
It'd be nice if we were. But yeah, I for obvious reasons it's not happening, but it's still like now, because everybody's talking about basic income, like it's such a huge and relevant topic, so everybody just wants to talk to me. I'm like, I feel so popular. And really good stuff too, like just this week, a couple of days ago, I spoke to the Canadian Senate working group on basic income. The Senate is super excited about it and really loves the idea. So I was like, wow, I'm talking to some of the most powerful politicians in my country who can pass bills, and they want to pass this. So
what's it like to live in a country with a functioning government? I've never known.
Well,
Yeah, I don't
we're
know
not
either.
perfect. Like, Canada's
I didn't say
not
perfect. I said functioning.
and yeah, we're definitely.
I know. Well, Rob Ford
Right.
proves you're not perfect, but you function, because the Senate's excited about something that's obviously going to help everyone. It has no drawback.
Yeah, there's no drawback, and you know, Joe is no saint, but he's also no Donald Trump. So
Yeah.
I was
So I have a quick. I want to interject real quick.
Yeah.
What if we had our American politicians meet your Canadian politicians through a chat group such as this one, and had them talk to each other? How do you think could we make that happen? I don't know.
Our politicians would probably
say-
like scare the Canadian ones because they're so barbaric, but I don't know.
we guys have some really amazing people down there. I mean, AOC is a big hero for us up here. Yeah, I don't know. And you have Andrew Yang.
Man, I'm from New York. We got mixed feelings about AOC, but you know,
Yeah.
it's because she moved
We'll do-
from
we'll
being
do
real
one
like
better.
economic progressive to being to kind of letting go of the economic issues
yeah,
in favor of
there-
cultural
there's
progressivism. But
actually-
it's a
Yeah.
nuanced thing.
Badrin Khan is running against AOC, and she's actually for a basic income.
Interesting.
So
I've heard of
Yeah,
her.
yeah, exactly. So I'm more in favor of her.
I've heard of her before. I don't know a lot about American politics besides the craziness and insanity I see in the paper all the time. And
It's
the
an abyss.
I
It's a
subject
vortex.
myself to viewing Donald Trump's Twitter
It-
thread.
It's like the majority of people have really no say, because the way our system is set up, you've got the Electoral College and you've got, these basically for-profit corporations like the DNC and, the Republican equivalent, that which I don't know what that's called. I think it's called GOP.
The RNC.
Oh, the RNC. Okay. And it's like we are given a choice between turd soup and shit sandwich.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell. That I don't know how to put it.
I mean, I'll put it more literally. We have two corporatist parties fighting over a 5% difference in any policy.
Mhm.
Almost nothing meaningful. It's very much a charade. Very much.
And then they just throw the people crumbs.
Right. And
That's
what
it.
they do is they waste our effort by pretending to represent us, by foisting us into the party that most closely fits an identity they can flatter us into trying to, involve ourselves with.
Culture wars.
Yeah. Basically, we are coast taking these very strict sort of straitjacketing identities, put in these very compromised political parties, and our effort to make change is ground into nothing, and it's just directed into things like phone banking, where it doesn't seem to do anything, but we are told it does. So that's how we feel. I don't know.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
The corporations,
democratic.
it's not democratic because the corporations can literally buy both sides because there's only two candidates. So if they
Yeah.
really care about an issue, they just go and contribute to both of them.
And
But we
unlike
don't have the
Canada,
power
with
to do
virtually
that.
no limits in donations to private or corporate.
So
donations
it's
to
basically
individual
just like a
candidates.
big cesspool of corruption and lies and deceit.
And we also have almost no checks on what our media can call true, which
Yeah.
misinforms everyone in mass strategically to preserve
Yeah.
the status quo. It's a nightmare from which there is no
Proxies.
escape. Don't ever
Yeah.
come here. Don't think about us. Even knowing about us should make you tired.
The truth be told, especially with the pandemic, I thought the United States is a country I really don't want to visit right now, even though there's so many nice people there. But
We're lost. Forget about us. Save yourself.
oh,
Well, actually, I wouldn't mind to come to Canada as a refugee, and I'm thinking that
we
That's the
have
thing. Please start
pretty
taking us.
immigration
Yes.
policies. My boyfriend is a recent Canadian citizen from America. He's only been a Canadian citizen for like 3 or 4 years now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I would all the time I went to Vancouver. Everybody on the West Coast goes to Vancouver. And I mean, I enjoyed my stay. I mean,
Vancouver's
it's
beautiful.
pretty nice. Yeah. And I mean, it's so walkable. American cities, well, at least here in LA, we're not walkable. Over there, it's like you can walk. Over here, it's like there's it's like this urban sprawl. It's just ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would depend on what Canadian city, because Hamilton is kind of walkable, but it's very much a car-friendly city. Whereas Toronto, you don't want to drive in Toronto. I also found Vancouver to be walkable. And so is Montreal.
Yeah, but I think what you said about your jobs process and your economy, I guess it's the same in both countries, because
Yeah.
you said there are these gig jobs and you have to string them on together, and then they could just get rid of you without any warning, and that kind of sounds like our right to work. It's just I just decided that I didn't like the pants you were wearing today, so bye, I'm not working in the job anymore.
Yeah, pretty much. Or they can just say, we decide not to renew your contract. Your last day is next week. Goodbye.
Yeah. One of the
What
things-
Ariel was referencing, we have in this country things called misleadingly right to work laws, and they're actually laws that protect the employer's right to fire an employee pretty much for no reason whenever they feel like it.
Well, there was something I wanted to add about the gig economy thing, because I ran into this myself, and that is wage theft is a huge problem. I mean, you don't literally have the protections if you get stiffed after working. If the person you're working for on the in the gig economy decides to stiff you, your only recourse is to hire a lawyer. And if that employer, or what they call a client, is located out of state, you have to incur all these legal fees that you probably can't afford to hire a lawyer that is able to, handle an interstate lawsuit. And it doesn't even, you're not even covered under the same wage protection laws that a regular worker is, because you'd have to sue that business owner or that employer, who could very easily turn around, say, well, I'm going to file bankruptcy, and then do so. And then you're just an unsecured creditor. And it's like, yeah, well, good luck ever getting your money you're owed. Just, pick a number.
Wow.
And that's one of the things that a lot of people, don't talk about when they talk about the gig economy is, the huge problem of wage theft.
Yes. And yeah, being able to really get away with exploiting your employees.
Yep. So Jessie, did you with all these gig jobs and stuff, did you have to secure? Did you have a degree or not? Because everybody tells us that makes a difference, but I see that it's like whether you have a degree or not, it's like you still struggle and you go through a hard time.
Yeah, I have like 99.9% of a bachelor's degree and a whole bunch of other like qualifications and college stuff and work experience that makes me a very qualified, educated person with a really nice resume. And despite that, I've still always struggled to find jobs. And I'm just one of many people I know. I have friends who have master's degrees and bachelor degrees who are working as baristas in coffee shops and bartenders, because that's the only jobs that there are. Or minimum wage.
That's the standard job for a master's degree holder, I'm pretty sure.
We're the most educated and poorest generation. And why would you try and exploit and gut out an entire generation of people? Like,
you're right.
It just seems so backwards for a society. This is why one of the big reasons why, like, economically, I support basic income, because I see it as an investment in humanity. It isn't just, free handout from the government. It's investing in people. If you have money to be able to build the economy or go back to school or do what I did, build my business, then you will. People want to do more with their life than just sit around playing video games all day. You'll get very bored very quickly. Yeah.
So Jessie, as I understand it, you had a chance to testify before your Congress pretty recently, right?
Yeah, it was just a few days ago. So that was the Canadian Senate, which I guess is the equivalent of your Congress. And
that's great.
Can you tell us more about what that's like? Because Angelo just joined us, and he's part of an effort on our part to go to Congress on our side. And so if you could tell us about, what was the procedure like? How did you get invited? And then how did you, pull together information? And how long did they give you to speak? Or how did it work? We'd love to hear about how it works for you.
Yeah, so in our government, our members of parliament are elected, but then the members of the Senate are appointed by the Prime Minister. So they're an appointed governing body that acts as the second body to pass bills and debate that. So and the Senate can also bring bills to the House. So a couple months ago, a group of senators, 50 of them, signed an open letter to the Prime Minister calling for basic income. And I think this just happened like just at the beginning or just before the pandemic hit and everything was shut down. And then in Canada, with the pandemic, what Canada has done is proposed what's called the Canada Economic Relief Benefit. And it is kind of like a basic income. Every single person who had lost their job due to COVID-19 was able to receive up $2,000 a month from the government for that. But there's still people falling through the cracks. And so, it's just a big topic in politics right now. And of those 50 senators, they've created a working group to further explore a call for basic income. And the senator who led it, a woman named Kim Pate, announced an inquiry into looking into this bill. So she gave a speech at the Senate House and said, we're going to look into this. Around the time that she did that, I did a webinar that was hosted by an organization called the Tamarack Institute, and it was a Canada-wide webinar. And one of Kim Pate's staffers happened to watch the webinar and said to the senator, "You need to talk to Jessie. She has these photos. She has this story. Just get her on." So then I got a phone call from her, and she invited me to come to this working group meeting, and it's all been doing online because of the circumstances. So it was like this online virtual meeting. It was only an hour. I probably talked for about 20 minutes. I told my story very similar to like what I've told you guys. I showed the photos to the senators, and I treat the photos as though they're public domain. Like anybody can share the photos, can view them, can publish them, use them however you want. Everything is legal. The people in the photos have consented and signed release forms. So I said that to the senators and gave them the photos, and the feedback was excellent. They said that they found my presentation inspiring. Now they're wanting to talk about getting these photos into different Canadian art galleries and talking about publishing opportunities and stuff. So I'm really excited as to what that'll look like. But yeah, it was the largest and most powerful governing body I've talked to up to this point. And I've been very privileged to be able to talk to some major Canadian leaders in politics. And so, yeah, it was a cool experience. And afterwards I was like, wow, I don't talk to the Senate every day. So
what kind of advice would you give us Americans from your experience with talking to people like on the ground level, and then talking to, people who can make the changes? Like, what kind of advice should we be following?
With the basic income movement, like we have so many resources. Like I know in Canada there are there's so many basic income, like there's a Basic Income Canada network, there's UBI Works, there's basic income networks. Like in my city of Hamilton, I'm on the steering committee for the Hamilton Basic Income Group, and I'm actively involved with the Ontario Basic Income Group. So I know in the United States you have to have similar networks and groups. You have USBIG, you have like Andrew Yang's Humanity Forward, and even just what you are all doing in the Yang Gang. So like you guys have support, and I know a big problem that I see in Canada is oftentimes we seem to be sometimes we're not as good at being united as we can be. We all know each other, we all get along, but sometimes people will try and end up overlapping on projects and ideas instead of keeping a united front. But then with all those resources comes like the knowledge, the statistics, the numbers that show that this works and that this is a good idea. But then also what we need is stories. And I know that that's my unique place in the basic income movement, is that I have this resource, these stories that show that like the Ontario Basic Income Pilot was more than just 4,500 people getting $1,400 a month. It was this person who has a name, who has a spouse, who has a child, who wants to go back to school, has a job, has dreams. And I think those stories also make an impact, because it's one thing to read an economical graphic chart on why basic income works, but it's another thing to convince an average person on the street. And what that is the power.
Jessie, we have quite a number of like conservatives here in this country, and Republicans very in favor of a universal basic income, because it supports, like you said, entrepreneurship and business growth. But sometimes it's hard to where we have these diehard dinosaurs in our halls of power to get them out of that headspace of like a handout. So I think the best thing to do when coming at the conservatives from their viewpoint is to flip this thing on its head and say, if you don't support this, you don't support autonomy and people having their own business and growth and entrepreneurship. So what do you think? Have you tried going about it to this new conservative people that have been elected like that?
Yeah, because that sort of conservative feel does exist and is very much alive and well in certain parts of Canada. Like the province of Alberta, for instance, is notoriously conservative, often to their own detriment. And
That's where Jordan Peterson was from, huh?
Jordan Peterson's from Toronto. Well, he's a professor at the University of Toronto. So he's in a more liberal part of Canada, but like a lot of people in Alberta love Jordan Peterson. In fact, I know people who like him, and I don't.
No,
Reasons.
I don't care for that guy.
Yeah,
I don't care for Mr. Peterson.
I don't care for Mr. Peterson, but
Neither do I.
I do not like him with green eggs and ham. I do not like him, Sam I am.
Yeah, so he's a strange character, but like there is that same conservative flavor exists. Like even my hometown where I grew up, a lot of people live by that. Like if you are in poverty, it is entirely your fault. It is a reflection of you and your character. If you are rich, it is because you worked hard and you deserve it.
Yeah.
You got
Peterson is disgusting.
Bootstrapped.
Yeah, Bucko, like, yeah.
It's funny that this Canadian is like selling the fake American dream.
Right, exactly. It's
a fake American for a fake dream.
I thought he kind of when the SJW stuff was going a little too far, I saw him as like a counterweight, but now I just think he's out of his mind and he just sucks. Because I remember hearing him say that, like, something about negotiating power. He said, yeah, it's about negotiating power. And if you just don't have negotiating power, then you're just a slave. And you should just be okay with that. That's okay. And it's like, you asshole. What is that?
Like that's why I don't like One Must Imagine Sisyphus happy. Like that's just bullshit. Yeah.
That's a strange thought.
Yeah.
The thing is that a lot of people like Jordan Peterson, they confuse collective responsibility with personal responsibility. And it's like, it's hard to nail that fine line, but it's like at some point, yes, we do have to talk about personal responsibility, but we also have to talk about collective responsibility too. And when we're supporting an entire structure that, basically rigs the game and forces you to play 400 rounds of Monopoly, where you're not allowed to even play, and then for another 50 rounds, you're finally allowed to play, but you're forced to play on behalf of the other game players that you're playing against, You're
still not getting 200 for pass and go.
Yes, forget getting 200 for pass and go. I mean, that doesn't even exist. I mean, that basically describes...
Basically, it's a rigged game of Monopoly. So that's a rigged system. So let me ask, did the companies that got the bailouts, did they have to clean up their room first? I think their room was pretty damn dirty. I think they made the room a pigsty and never cleaned it up and got the money. So don't give me that crap, Mr. Peterson.
Right? Yeah, and I just don't like it isn't even statistically true. There have been studies that have been done that have looked over the 50 years plus of basic income pilots that have taken place all over the world, and it asks the exact question, if we give people a basic income, are they going to work less or more, or what's going to happen?
Right.
And overwhelmingly,
it's like, how are we supposed to clean up our own room without being able to afford any cleaning supplies?
Yeah.
He's an idiot.
How are you supposed to clean up your own room when what would have been a $5,000 roof repair 7 years ago is now a $55,000 roof replacement, and all of your stuff is crammed downstairs into the first floor because it rains upstairs in your bedroom and in your other upstairs rooms? The thing people don't understand is that, like wealth, poverty or negative wealth is also cumulative. And there's a compound penalty with being poor. The longer that poverty remains unaddressed, or even worse, addressed improperly, which that's even worse than doing nothing, the more the problem compounds. It doesn't just, resolve itself. And for people to think that it does, well, they're engaging on a fool's errand.
Well, okay, so I heard this example at one point in time, or comparison, and it was talking about okay, so you have this lawnmower, right, and the blades on it are super dull, so it's taking you 4 hours to mow this lawn. But if you stopped and took just 10 minutes to sharpen the blades, you would be done in 1 hour, right? Or just a fraction of the time. It's like having a car that you run into the ground versus doing upkeep, right? And so like we don't have money to do the repairs, but also we're like, no, I don't even have time to sharpen the blade. It's going to take 4 hours to do this, right? And so we don't even like take time to sharpen the blade, let alone, have time to do this maintenance so that it lasts longer and is more efficient, right? We don't optimize anything we do. It's just, that's what the UBI would be doing though,
So there was, in Canada, back in the 1970s, there was another basic income pilot that took place in the province of Manitoba, and it was called Mincome, and they chose one village. It was called Dauphin, and they gave everybody in that village a basic income. And same thing happened in Ontario as it did in Manitoba. The pilot got canceled, and then all the data got put into boxes and left in a storage unit for 40 years. About 10 years ago, there was a woman named Evelyn Forget, and she's an economist at the University of Winnipeg, and she said, let's see what this data says. So she got into that storage unit, dug out all the boxes, found all this data, and showed that high school dropouts went down, hospital visits went down, crime went down, and the overall economy of the town improved. And they did this documentary about it. And the documentary is only like maybe 2 or 3 years old. It's really good. It's just called The Manitoba Story, and it's only like 20 minutes long. I highly recommend it. And in that documentary, they interview one guy, and this interview really sticks out to me. So this guy, he said that when they like 40 years ago, when they were on basic income, they used the money and bought a truck for the farm. And because they bought that truck, they could transport more livestock and more everything, harvest and everything. And so then because they were able to transport more livestock, they were able to make more money, and then they could buy more, and they could make, and so then the interview ends with this guy standing in a large scale industrial farming operation that his family has been now runs for generations. And the only reason that he has that farming operation is because they got that free handout from the government, and he bought a truck. And just thinking of like the millions of dollars that farming operation is worth, and the improvement to the economy of that community. Like it's just the proof's in the pudding.
Right. And Jessie, you're dealing with facts, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do conservatives love to always tell liberals sometimes and progressives? And I lean conservative. They say, the big one is, you know what? Facts don't care about your feelings. These are the facts. And these, no. In this case, it's their feelings.
Yeah.
That like this is a handout that doesn't care about the facts. So we have to go to some of these people who are against it and tell them that facts don't care about your feelings. This works.
And like I was thinking about it, a couple weeks ago, a person on my Facebook who was actually honestly my childhood bully started commenting and being like, I don't believe in basic income, and you shouldn't be so ungrateful and get your free handouts from the government. You're so lazy and all this stuff. And I'm sitting there being like, well, you're only able to be a stay-at-home mom running your MLM scheme because, you have a husband that's paying for all your stuff. And is that not a form of basic income? Also, you're getting the Canada Child Benefit. Also, you're getting the Canada Economic Relief Benefit. So, like, the hypocrisy is not
the charts.
Off the charts, not missed. And I am noting it in taking notes. And I might even send her this video after this. But then also, like, just the fact that you don't consider the privileges that you are living with to be a basic income because you are getting these things and you are part of this program.
Oh, God.
Sounds like a real Karen.
Yeah, I don't know.
The military also kind of has its own basic income that even for dependents. So my ex-stepdad had been in the military, and through his benefits, I was able to go to school without having to pay for it. I was trying to ride out the recession. That didn't, it's still here, essentially. But I also received money monthly and it provided a job. It was like a basic income plus benefits of all this support, and it was because he had participated. And I don't even think about this time in my life because I didn't even think about it as a basic income, right? I was just like, oh, this is really helpful. But you know, people who go to the military, you know, sometimes it's so they can afford schooling, you know, but like there's other benefits that happen monthly, you know, like if you got injured, here's a check for you, you know, this way you can survive. But we don't extend that to civilians. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Like dental care. I mean, you know, dental care, that's a big thing. I know a lot of people in my neck of the woods that for lack of any other opportunity available to them, if they were able to pass the physical to get accepted into the military, their main reason was, this is the only way I'm ever going to have health and dental benefits and, you know, and a chance to maybe, you know, get training to have a job. So it was all that. It was all that. It was the income plus, you know, getting a set of dentures by the time they were 20.
And that's crazy. And like I know I'm as a Canadian, I'm very, very lucky we have a free healthcare system. But our free healthcare doesn't involve like eye care or dental care either. We have to pay for that or have benefits on our job. Nor does it involve pharma care. So we have to, if we need prescription drugs for whatever reason, we have to pay for that out of pocket.
Who decided at some point that eyes are not important and teeth are not important? Like it's like just randomly pick two pieces of your body and say we're not going to take care of those. It's very
like, you know, we're dealt the bad hands because we have to wear glasses. So now we're just you know, the alternative is to be blind. Like that doesn't help.
Well, you know, I was watching this video and it was like subtle signs that people have wealth. And one of the subtle signs was that they have nice teeth because that's one of the first things they do with their wealth. And I'm like, really? So your teeth are a sign of wealth? And like, that's true.
It makes sense though. Like braces cost a lot of money. Like, you know, if your parents can afford to shell out the $5,000 to $10,000 for braces when you're in high school, then that's great. But if they can't, then you have bad teeth.
I had braces in like middle school. Holy shit.
Same here. I hated them.
Yeah, me too.
I lived a very privileged life because my parents could afford braces.
So I want to say that there's something about our two countries that we do have in common because we have a joint ancestry from the colonial period, right? And so we've inherited a lot of these systems from the British. Like the way that we run our bureaucracy, the way that we run our money. If you take a look at the current account balances of various countries across the entire, you know, planet, you will see that primarily the British system of money and governance is creating like current account balances that are very, very negative, right? Especially the United States, we're like in the trillions of negatives. Whereas, and everybody else who's on the positive side, they're like, how do they live like that? Like they have a whole different system of thinking about money. Like so in China, Taiwan, the Eastern Tigers or whatever, certain other countries are like, you know, they have to keep a current account balance that is positive. And so it's like, how do they both survive in this world? Because they have this, we've developed the same systems of thinking because of our British and French, possibly, and Spanish, you know, the European heritage that we've received through colonialism. And so now I see that you guys are also like participating in the maybe defund the police activities. And I'm wondering, how did Hamilton decide that they wanted to align themselves with, you know, and try to, some of the people in Hamilton are now working on this, including yourself, right?
Yes, and I'm keeping abreast of everything, and I've signed the defund the police call in support with Humans of Basic Income. Like Hamilton, for being a city of 500,000 people, is an extremely small town. Like everybody knows everyone in this city, and all of the advocates and activists, we all know each other, and we all work together on stuff. The history of the relationship with the police and certain populations in Hamilton is not good. Specifically, yes, with racialized communities, there is a history of racism with the police, but then the other community that's also been disproportionately targeted specifically in Hamilton is the LGBTQ community. So the big thing that happened actually took place last year, around this time last year. There was a Pride festival, and so there was a big festival at the big park in Hamilton, and you know there's music and people out and everything celebrating Pride. Before the festival, the organizers had warned the police, saying that there is a very large possibility that there's going to be protesters and there's going to be people who are going to turn up. And in the weeks leading up to Pride and in the weeks following Pride, there have been presence of people, the people who are part of the Yellow Vest movement, which is very anti-immigration, very racist, very anti-LGBTQ, and other like neo-Nazis protesting in front of City Hall. This is happening in Hamilton, took place in Hamilton. So of course, those people showed up, as well as some very strong fundamentalist Christians showed up. And then in response, there were people who had come to Pride in support of the Pride attenders. So they put up a big black cloth wall and tried to get these people out and alienate them. This erupted in violence. A lot of people got injured. The police took way too long to respond. Like the police just weren't there. And in fact, there is like records of people calling 911 and the police saying, well, you didn't want us at Pride anyway, so what are we doing here? Like that happened. So then in the aftermath, only one of the people who was part of that Yellow Vesters neo-Nazi group was arrested, while 3 to 4 people who were defending the Pride goers were arrested. And in fact, the one that was arrested wasn't even at the event at all. So the agitation and relationship between the police and LGBTQ community and racialized populations is tense and has been tense all year. And so then the police report came out with this last week, and this happened at the same time as George Floyd happening in the United States and Black Lives Matter and everything. So there have been protests every day, a lot of Black Lives Matter, a lot of solidarity protests, but so far they've been peaceful. Like overt violence hasn't happened. And I remain cautiously optimistic just because I know my community that it can stay like that. But with the lack of accountability with the police in what happened at Pride last year, like the mayor of Hamilton is extremely unpopular right now because of that. The police are extremely unpopular. So it's just tense. It feels like a Cold War right now. And I'm just kind of like, I wonder if the shoe's going to drop or not.
I think there's some kind of like worldwide awakening going on here with like basic income and police. So I'm interested that's not just the United States. Everybody across all countries are just saying like, what the hell has been going on? Like, I think it's less to do with countries than it is to do with generations.
Yeah.
And just the younger generation is like, what is this bullshit? What kind of like economy have we been given that everything is just like stress and anxiety and worrying? We have all this technology and computers and smartphones. You're telling me this is the best we can do?
Yeah, it's so broken too. Like what kind of world do we want to live in where we have like abundance and technology and everything that's hoarded by a few people at the top while the rest of us suffer? And where we have like the lowest and most vulnerable of our populations are the ones that are racialized. Like it's just so wrong.
It's ass backwards.
Yes.
Angela, did you have something to say?
Yeah. I was just curious, is the Canadian police militarized the way the American police is?
Yes. So, like Hamilton, the Hamilton Police Service owns armored vehicles. They do have them. I have never seen them be used, but they have at least 2 or 3. So it is well militarized and has a budget depending on which police service it is. And then it also depends on the population. So like racism against Indigenous people is very much alive and well here in Canada. And that's a huge thing. In fact, like the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, it was originally created as a policing force against Indigenous people. So like the history of violence against Indigenous populations is huge and even goes all the way up to today. So like there's been like a proposed pipeline that's going to be built over sacred Indigenous territory. And so these chiefs and these tribes are saying, hell no, you cannot do this. You can't do this. This is wrong. And they're getting arrested. And they're getting like they're having their rights taken away. And it's really, you don't really know exactly what's happening because we're talking about like the woods in northern British Columbia. So like that happens. And it is like this sort of justified violence, I guess, in the name of progress, but it's a pipeline. And it's not the first time that this has happened. Like in 1990, there was a similar thing where a company wanted to build a golf course over a Mohawk burial ground. And that caused a huge amount of violence and a lot of fighting and like an actual standoff against with indigenous people and the police.
Oh, one of our members was actually there.
Okay.
I was there.
You were at the
I was at Ganasataki.
Holy.
I was at Caledonia.
Yeah.
I know who Gary McHale is.
Yeah. So
yeah, and I remember.
Everybody says that Canada is a peaceful, loving, polite country, and we're all great and wonderful. But no, we have a huge history of racism and violence.
And it's even beyond the racism, because what we're dealing with the Haudenosaunee, which is the Six Nation Iroquois, which Mohawk, is this fact that there's international treaty law involved, which compounds things even more, because most people do not understand the concept of diminished sovereignty, what it means to be a diminished sovereign. So it was a whole bunch of all that wrapped up with it. But yes, I was there. I'm proud to say that I stood.
That's amazing.
With the Mohawk warriors. I am proud to say that I stood more than once.
Thank you.
So,
yeah,
I was very, very much there. And Gary McHale, he was one of the Nazis that when you were talking about neo-Nazis and white nationalists. Gary McHale was one of the ones who was very problematic in Caledonia, which is one of the more recent incidents that occurred over the illegal sale of Mohawk land to a developer, a real estate developer, and it didn't work out well. That the people got angry with just cause, and then Gary McHale shows up with his crew and decided he was going to go try to pick a fight. Wrong move. You don't do that when you've got people who are willing to stand their ground and who have at least 600 years experience of standing their ground very effectively. Who are willing to meet you at the barricades, along with their allies.
That's awesome and incredible, because reform needs to happen. Most reserves in Canada don't have access to clean drinking water.
Right. Attawapiskat is a prime example.
Attawapiskat. Even just like within an hour of where I live, the Six Nations on the Grand River, no drinking water. Tyinega in Belleville, no drinking water. And if you go up north in like Attawapiskat, like that area, like the cost of food is astronomical. Like you're looking at $40 for a bushel of apples.
Because it has to be flown in.
They're rotten. Yeah, because it has to be flown in. And that sort of income disparity is horrifying. And like I say this because I grew up in a small town in Ontario called Hanover, and right next to Hanover was a village called Walkerton. In 2000, thanks to the cuts in the provincial government by the Conservative Premier at the time, Mike Harris, E. coli got in the water in the wells of Walkerton, and there were enough cuts that there was enough oversight in the water treatment plant that it poisoned the entire town, with thousands of people getting sick and people dying, people I knew. And this was an international tragedy. If you Google Walkerton, you will get the whole history of it. And this was seen as this horrible, terrible, terrible thing. And I'm thinking, yes, it is a horrible, terrible, terrible thing. There are people I know who have lifelong illnesses because of what happened there. But in the same breath, there are also reserves and places that in Canada that haven't had clean drinking water for decades and decades and decades. And we're
Stony Creek, the Dudley George. Remember Dudley George?
Yes. Stony Creek is like 20 minutes away from where I live.
Yeah. And that was another situation that was allowed to fester and resulted in basically the place being made uninhabitable.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I feel we've gone on so many rabbit holes in this discussion so far, but it does all kind like there's a beautiful intersectionality to all these. And I think basic income is one of those beautiful intersectionalities.
Right. I think it's because basic income gives the power back into the hands of the people rather than the corporations and the, leaders, quote unquote, that they just don't like that. Even though all the evidence points to the happiness and the mental health and the productivity, I think it boils down that the leaders and the corporations, they have such a good thing going on. They've had this incestuous relationship for years and years and years that giving this kind of power to people is just like, they're scared. I don't know.
Yep.
Jessie, I'd like to ask you a favor since you live in Hamilton, which is not too far from the 6.
Yep.
I was kind of informally kind of adopted because I stood with the Mohawk Warriors. I'd like you to tell Donna Powless, who is one of the clan mothers. She was really, she's actually my family who's not like blood family, but tell her from Jacqueline, because I've not been able to get back up across the big water for several years since I got sick and then lost our vehicle to repossession. Please tell her that Jacqueline from Erie County, Pennsylvania, okay, says Ganalankwa, and I miss you. Ganalankwa means I love you and care for you in Mohawk.
Wonderful.
Tell her that for me.
I will do my best.
Because I don't know if I'm going to get to see my adopted family before I die.
Yeah.
And I would
with the border being closed, and I don't know when, I know the United States is wanting the border open, at least Trump is saying that, and Canada doesn't want the border open. Canadians are not happy.
Don't open the door. For us.
No, let us in.
Don't let us in. We cannot be trusted at this point as a group.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's
okay.
Yeah, I can absolutely do that for you, Jacqueline. If you can send me an email and give me the contact information of Donna, I would love to do that for you.
I don't know if Donna's on the internet, but you can find her at the 6. She's one of the clan mothers.
Okay. I know some people in the 6 that might be able to help me find her.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Tell her we're trying that. I've been down here trying to get rid of the Ota Oswegayo who's in the White House. That's Mohawk for a big bird full of shit, too full of shit to fly. Hey, you won't learn that on the guided tour.
Oh yeah. But I do say, there are people who would have voted for Donald Trump in Canada.
I know, because they wouldn't have known.
Our countries are very similar. We have some differences, but we have a lot in common.
What
I have to say, yeah.
Oh,
please go ahead, Faye. No, I insist the other Faye speaks.
Well, okay. Well, what I find interesting is for the first time ever, we have an ability to talk to people on a person-to-person level in other countries, and not through the people in charge, right? We have so much more fluidity to communicate and actually just connect our networks in a capacity only available to us because of the internet. And now that we have video calls, you can see facial expressions. You can actually I dated a guy one time who stuttered and he couldn't even talk to somebody unless it was face to face, right? And so that was such a beautiful invention to help progress our countries, right? But we also need to learn from other countries. I feel like we need people from Norway on our thing, right?
I can
they figured out a few things.
Yeah. And it's
well. Let's do it.
Absolutely. I have some pretty good friends over there.
Yeah, we have this cultural arrogance here where we really feel like we don't need to learn from anyone or anything, and it's a hard thing to cut through.
Yeah, but
well, if it's any consolation, my parents are from Iran, so there's that.
Nice. Because with COVID, really, I imagine the only person who's happy about COVID is the CEO of Zoom, because we're all doing this, and if we didn't have this technology, and disasters, I guess, breed a technology and a need for technology. So like video calling and working from remote has suddenly got a lot easier. But it was really cool. Like when I went to India last year, I was one of 3 Canadians at the entire conference. Like there were people there from everywhere. People from Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, United States. There were so many people, and it's really cool because like I left that conference like some of my best learning wasn't what, like, you know, the talks and everything were super inspiring and super amazing and cool to hear all this research. But it was like the times after and in between, like, you know, having lunch with these people from different countries, and, you know, going out for drinks after the event, and you know, all this, like, there was like this deep sense of camaraderie, and really cool to see it from like just all over the world. Like there, I remember like one of the very last nights of the Congress, like we had like a big dinner together, and then afterwards, like maybe about a dozen of us had a little bit too much to drink, and we were all like singing songs from our countries, like folk songs from our countries. I don't know if you would ever understand this reference, but for Canada, I sang a song by the Tragically Hip because they are our songwriters of our country. So, but yeah, it was just like fun and cool to see that, and see that we can learn from each other and be in this movement together and have so many different cultures. Like it was just so cool. I've never had an experience like that ever before.
Well, now that we had this George Floyd thing, we're connecting with people in other countries all over the world. So we finally have something to resonate with on a capacity that needs to launch us forward as a like global awakening, you know, as was said earlier, you know. And so, but honestly, I hate to say it, we need to tack UBI to this movement somehow. The Black Lives Matter, you know, it's affecting them. They need it, you know, but like to connect the two is difficult to really do, in my opinion.
Except that Martin Luther King had already done it, right? He basically did it 50 years ago, and we're again like have to rediscover everything, like we don't remember our history. You know, it's like it's already been done, and we didn't. We need to like go right back to it right now and pick it up as if it was yesterday. You know.
Yeah. Like over here in the United States, we have like a media industrial complex that like wants to block out the voices of reason and replace it with the voices of bullshit, because Yang was just deliberately, you could see, blocked, no airtime, no, it's like, and you know what else is important about having money? Having money is a lot more about like being able to afford stuff. It's being able to have a voice. Now that like in this country, money is considered speech, when you take away someone's money, you take away their seat at the table. And there's an old saying that like when you don't have a seat at the table, you are on the menu. Yeah. So our lives of our generation have been put on the menu because they've taken away like our liquidity and all of this, and it has to stop, you know.
But let's go back to why we even need the money in the first place. I mean, we're talking about a colonial history where some people who used money met up with people who didn't really use a whole lot of money. I mean, they were very self-sufficient within their groups, right? So, and everybody in their groups kind of had certain societal norms that did not involve the exchanging of trinkets or things in order to, you know, present yourself as a worthy person. I mean, you were a mom, or you were, you know, the child of somebody. Like these were your relationships within the community. And so I'm wondering like how we can you know, get back to like a normal relationship type of thing, you know, within your community, and representing yourself as being a worthy person because of your relationship to your community, rather than, you know, like this is my job, my function in the community for which I get paid, and if I don't have a function, then I'm no longer a worthy person. And we have that in common, like all of us who have gone through that, all of the countries that went through the whole colonizing. We have it in common, and it's a vast amount of land geographically where that have been affected by colonialism. I mean, it's in South America, it's in North America, it's in Africa, it's in Asia, it's everywhere. So I don't know if there's even places in Europe, but it feels like it's sort of that whole system was taken out into so many parts of the world, and we really haven't finished dealing with it.
I feel like we have like this opportunity to build a better world here, and maybe like COVID, I think, exposed the flaws in the society, and we've seen these flaws, we've known about them, hell, we've lived through them, but now like they're just laid bare for everybody to see. And if we get out of the COVID era and the world is the same as before, then we've moved backwards.
So I found this quote earlier. I'm gonna try and pull it up real quick. And essentially, I mean, it was in the movie called Ever After, and it was talking about how if you suffer your people to be ill-educated and their manners corrupted from infancy, and then punish them for those crimes to which their first education disposed them, then what else is to be concluded, sire, but that you first make thieves and then punish them. And I think that's essentially also what's been happening in our country too, is like we make thieves because like we start from infancy and we haven't really corrected this problem.
So that quote, and the heart of that quote comes from St. Thomas More, who wrote Utopia. And he said the exact thing. So that he's credited as one of the fathers of basic income in the 1500s, because in his book, he's saying, why are you punishing these people for stealing bread? Like you made the infrastructure which has forced this person to steal bread. Why not just give them money?
I want to comment on
need to live.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You froze for a second, and I think I started speaking. Are you still frozen? Yes, I think Jessie's frozen.
Well, what were you gonna say? Unless you're asking her a question.
Oh, I want her to hear, but well, I was gonna say, this is a function of our legacy media, which is owned by the same like 5 companies that tell the same story together. When you saw the protests start, you saw a lot of people out there, of course, for systemic racism, for an end to police brutality, racist police practices, but they were also there for broader systemic inequality, including economic inequality. And that was reported on at the beginning of the protests. And now the legacy media companies have gotten together and decided they're only going to report on like the racial aspect of the protests, essentially, which is probably going to be effective. Historically, it has been. That's what they do in this country. It's one of the ways they're able to stop economic progress from ever happening by taking other worthy causes and then conflating it with what was a cry for economic progress, saying we did what you asked, and then just forgetting that there was an economic element because they've addressed a different element. So, yeah.
Well, we've lost our guest for a moment due to lag or something
during my thesis.
You're gonna have to type it into the chat so she can read it when she gets in.
You can still get the recording.
I always enjoy your doctoral dissertations.
Well, then you should come back when I'm trying to get a couple people on the show. I'm not gonna say who, but come back for them. Talk to Jeremy about it today.
The thing too is that we have it recorded, so she can watch it. She has to.
Well, it is 4:15 or so, I think. Yeah. So I guess we are past time.
I don't know how long you guys booked her for, but I resent her the Zoom link to see if that would help. But I don't know.
Why don't we talk for about 5 minutes and see if she might be trying to rejoin, because she might want to continue.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we'll be here for 1 hour or two.
If she enters
we must
a room
apologize
that's
to the
empty.
viewers and listeners for technical difficulties.
So I mean, I've done a podcast with her before, and her Wi-Fi sometimes cuts out. So give her just a couple minutes. I think she'll jump back on. I think it's just a Wi-Fi connection.
Is Hamilton kind of rural?
This is great. I think we can invite one person from like every country.
She said her internet died, and she reset it.
Yeah, people from other countries would be good to have on.
Yeah.
In like a
Iran
sense.
also had a basic income experiment
Did it?
in one town. Yeah.
I had no idea. See, I knew Canada, but I did not know Iran.
Yeah.
One
You
of
gotta
our,
tell us about this, Ariel.
I don't
Why'd you
know
wait
if
till like
the-
episode 80 to mention this?
Well, I mean,
go on.
Iran,
Yeah.
you know, is kind of like a pariah country to the U.S. So, but let me check which one it was. I think it was in Shiraz. Let me double check.
I think it's great if we get other countries involved in this chat because, you know, as she was saying, there's lots of people in other countries interested in this movement. And if we already have some groundwork, we could actually help other countries get a leg up and or learn from them. And then we become more powerful than the U.S. And then, you know, if they're hearing references in other countries talking about this and we're already working with them, you know, like
Well,
we
listen.
Here.
Here's something I want to talk about if we get to that point. Ariel, I'm going to come back to you in just a minute. Why are we not presenting UBI as a solution to what's happening in Hong Kong? Because they've been protesting for over a year, and I believe that they're not successful, not because China is not open to it, not because the Hong Kongese, you know, government or the whatever, the elite or whatever. It's not that. It's because their five demands are not possible to meet for a government that wants to call themselves sovereign. So they're asking for the government to give up sovereignty, which they can't, right? And so they're at an impasse. And so if we could like present that as a possibility for people in Hong Kong to think about, this is a demand that you should be going for.
I feel like we need to talk to Macaulay about this. He's got a lot of connections in other countries.
Seems like
we have a member that is from Australia that also has a daughter currently living in Australia.
Is that
Welcome
Raz?
back, Jessie.
Rad?
Jesse's coming back.
Yes,
but
that is rad.
I think I'm back.
Rad.
Okay.
Welcome back.
So
back.
Iran, it showed that it increased how much people worked as opposed to the opposite, what everybody thinks. But still, even the conservative part of Iran looked at it negatively, that it would make them lazy, even though it proved otherwise.
Yeah, of course.
So, you know.
Same old
yeah.
story everywhere you hear it.
Yeah.
So
Hey, Jesse, I just want to check in with you real quick. How much time do you have with us today?
I can probably do another 10 to 15 minutes.
cool.
Okay, cool.
Is
Perfect.
that cool?
So what I was saying when you dropped off. So our legacy media, because it's owned by the same five corporations, does this thing whenever there is a movement in America since the 70s that involves economic demands. And they just kind of edit out the economic demands if they can focus on anything else. And they change the narrative of what like protesters ask for, what movements ask for selectively, so that the most important things, the real material needs of people, never ever get met. And
You saw
that is
that
a
happen with
function of our.
Occupy.
Yeah, exactly.
Occupy.
I was at Occupy personally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they just edit the narrative here because we don't have the laws that we used to.
I would like to actually jump in on
Yeah.
what
don't have the
Shale
media
just
laws.
said, and
Media.
this actually goes back to a question that Faye Koo asked, I believe, and that is, or Faye Downey, sorry, and that is Black Lives Matter in their policies actually has a demand for a UBI as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
And that's a part that's never mentioned.
I honestly think
And
it's
that's
because
why.
money is like true power, because a policy change here and there only goes so far, but it doesn't give the power just directly in the most obvious way, in the most just clear way. So that's why they try to dance around the money thing, because they say, well, as long as they're dependent on these systems that they have to go through our bureaucracies and kind of kiss our ring to get the money, we keep the power. But if it's just direct, then that's like the direct transfer of power, where we don't have these bureaucratic mechanisms to keep people in check. So it's obvious.
Well, I mean, okay, so I want people to at least practice a visualization from here. Like, imagine any movie and be like, okay, if you give $1,000 a month to each of these characters in this movie, how would that change the plot line, right? And literally, that's what we're trying to do with our countries, right? And like most movies are representative of realities that exist already, okay? And so if you use this kind of like thing of a movie that, you know, even with kings and queens, what would happen if all their servants, oh, she left again. But like if all your servants got $1,000 a month, like how would that affect the king and queen? You know, like that's essentially what we're trying to do. And that's not an easy feat. But you're like,
Yeah, they don't.
How would that
They would have to pay people more if they still wanted servants. They don't want that. So you know, that's really
Well,
what we're up against.
Here's the thing. Isn't it funny that we've had to have all these pilots, all these tests for UBI to prove our case, but yet this persistent insistence on doing the things that don't work, i.e., you know, tweaking this, tweaking that, and having means tested this and improved means tested that. Those were never expected to be subjected to tests, but yet we've got at least 40 plus years of proven epic failure of those things that it's like the definition of insanity, of doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result. But yet this is the one thing that, no, we have not yet done on a large scale, but we've got all these pilot programs that bear it out, that prove our case.
Well, some people don't realize that all we need is America's 2/3 majority vote for things like to bypass some of the presidential stuff. Like I was talking to Angelo and working through some policy ideas, and like, you know, we got to be able to take things to Congress, and we have to be able to like get 2/3 of America's vote for some of these things. And I don't think Americans realize how much like power they have as a majority. And if we have the whole globe doing a whole bunch of riots, like we technically could get our 2/3 vote, no problem, with several different things. I mean, it's a whole range of things we have to address, but it's not entirely out of our power.
Yeah, that's a mechanism that I don't think a lot of people realize. You can get things, and this is a true democracy, you can actually gather enough signatures to get an agenda onto your state's ballot, and it just requires 2/3 of the states to get it passed into law. It actually bypasses Congress and the president directly, because it is the people officially having spoken.
But I mean, a lot of people don't know even how to like set that up, and so we almost have to train people on how to get it on the ballot, you know, like stuff like that. But we need it. We need to teach people, but we also need inspiration from other countries sometimes, I think.
Or we need basically to look at, you know, how the First Nations communities, you know, people that were written off and their systems dismissed, and you know, the Haudenosaunee, Iroquois is just one prime example of that, and say, hey, look, you know, we got to admit we don't have all the answers, so let's look at what works, and let's look to, you know, at other people, and not think that, you know, that we have all the answers, because no one person has all the answers.
Exactly. And eventually, I'm just thinking we need to take the bull by the horns. And unfortunately, like I'm hoping, I'm praying that it happens in a non-violent, calm, good way. But it's like, I think these protests are peaceful, but I think like what's getting to the riots and the arson is that when is it just taken by the horns? And how much is this bull going to like ravage things? I mean, like, I don't know, we'll need a few tranquilizer darts, something, but it's like, but not just take the bull by the horns. I'm not talking about like getting violent. I'm talking about like confronting these UBI deniers with the straight facts and the straight stories, and then just what are they going to come back with? Their nonsense. I don't understand, because some people don't want to take the bull by the horns. They want to, be nice. But I'm saying that, I don't know what's going to be an eventuality.
Or in the words of
argue
Andrew
with the
Yang,
story.
We have the data. Yeah, the data
There's
is
stories and there's data. Like it's not an ideological opinion. If you believe that, if you pull yourself up the bootstraps, that's your opinion. It's an ideology. It has basis in fact. Whereas we know when we have basis in fact and statistics and everything that shows that a basic income works, and stories.
Yeah, well, it's like slavery. Well, what like, did they think that slavery was like something that was needed for a healthy, functioning society? No, they wanted.
No.
They said, oh, I'm my skin color is this, your skin color is that. You're gonna work for me for free, and that's the way that God wants it. And then if they're trying to give us the same spiel with a UBI, that's just the way that God wants it. We're going to say, shove it up your ass. Like, sorry, I get pissed, but like, yeah.
No, totally.
You're absolutely right, Ariel. That is exactly what we will say.
Exactly.
While we still have Jessie for a minute, I would like to ask her a little bit about some of these demands that I see on there, defund the police. Okay, so these are some demands that I see here. We call on the city of Hamilton to ensure that the police are not ticketing houseless people for existing in public. Is that correct?
Yes. Can you send me the link to the? I've seen.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
The article. I'm just trying to pull it up right now and not moving fast enough.
There you go. I hope this.
I wrote the article.
I'll read a few more while you're getting that up. There's also demanding that they stop surveilling communities and to halt the expenditure of tax dollars on high-tech surveillance equipment, to halt all purchases with tax dollars of weapons. That's one of my big things, is that if I don't want you to be using tear gas, then I don't need to be buying it for you. And if I'm the boss, because I'm the people, then I have to take responsibility for not giving you those things, right?
Yeah.
There's also really interesting things like we demand that the school board refrain from calling the cops on kids.
Yeah, and that is a thing that happens. Like there are police officers that will like work in the schools and work in school boards, and there is there is a problem with bullying and violence with kids in schools in Hamilton. Just even specifically last year, a 13 or 14-year-old kid was murdered by a bully at a school. He was stabbed in front of his mother. This happened in Hamilton last year. It was horrifying. Yeah.
I mean, I think schools are, again, tying back to the colonialism problem, where we've inherited all these problems and we can't even think about them clearly, because we think of education as the meritocracy, you're going to build your way out of this thing. But in Canada, you've had a history of trying to retrain the Aborigines, or the original peoples, the first peoples of your nation, to a new way of life by re-educating them and taking the children and using the education system to teach them a whole different way of life and a different culture.
And those were called residential schools, and they were systemically horrifying. There was a lot of abuse and violence, and a lot Children died.
It's an indoctrination system.
It was like they would make Indigenous kids cut their hair. They were to adapt to a Western Europe Eurocentric Christian ideology to live by. It was not good. The last residential school closed in 1996. So
wow.
The very last residential school in Canada closed in 1996. But countless numbers of kids were displaced, and there's horrifying stories. There's one story of a child who ran away from a residential school in the 1960s and is hundreds of miles away from both civilization, let alone his home. And he was found frozen next to a train track. He died.
That's like the most horrifying story.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like
Charlie Wenjack was his name.
God, it's like we look at first world countries. and it's like you think that, like, sorry Faye, it's like I just had to say, it's like some parts of first world countries are just as barbaric and sick as like the worst third world parts. That's all I have to say.
You've got to remember that what was done to the First Nation Native American people originally started back in Europe between different factions of Europeans. The very first imperialism, was after the Roman Empire. You had, Western Europe, or you had Britain mostly, having an imperialism against the Irish and against the Slavs in the Balkans, and what for generations, people in Western Europe and in Great Britain were acculturated into accepting as normal, and the way things are done was brought over here to the quote New World, which, yeah, you're replicating a system that, you really have to go all the way back to the roots and look at, how did this all start? It's very complicated, but people, how many people have time to deep dive research these histories? And a lot of these histories are not taught in school, and they're not taught in schools for a reason. Okay? They're not taught in schools for a reason. And it's like to get to the knowledge and to learn, to understand where we need to go, we need to first understand where we're coming from. And that's why, being able to go back and back and back and not just take the, mainstream, accepted historians' word for things. If you look at the way many British, writers back in the 18th and 19th century were describing British imperialism, as the way it unfolded and manifested in India. They acted like it was just, something that happened by accident, as if, there was an imperialism, there was an imperialism that just happened without any empire. And nobody ever questioned these narratives. Like, how do you get an imperialism without empire? How do you get a colonialism without empire? And whose stories have been suppressed? Because there's the old saying is that it's, the winner, history is always told by the winners. And that's true. There's a lot of truth in that.
I was thinking just earlier, actually, about how the shaming has kind of flopped to the other side finally to some capacity, because, we've essentially had narcissists in control of our lives, and they've been shaming us for whatever they decide to, the perception is not our perception, right? And now all the people who've been bullied by essentially all these people are like, no, and they're providing video proof, which is, a narcissist's favorite thing is secrecy, right? And then, so now we have video, and we're like, hey, by the way, the narcissist just lied. Here's some proof. And this is the behavior, and society is putting their judgment upon them. And I don't necessarily think how we're handling it is ethical, in my opinion, but the coin has flipped. We're like, by the way, look what's happening. Look at my side of the story. And so I saw a image was, it was George Floyd, a mural, and it was painted over. And he was publicly shamed for doing that because they outed him, right? And he publicly apologized and said sorry, but that wouldn't have happened had people not called him out on it, right? And so it's stuff like that. What'd you say, Angelo, in the chat?
Oh, I said that it was just recently made illegal to film the police. You can actually be arrested and face fines for filming the police over here, which says a lot about how much they fear the public actually being able to see what's happening.
That's a dictatorship.
In Tucson, Arizona.
Crazy.
Is that
Yes.
just for your city, or is that for a county, or for the entire state? How did it work? Yeah.
It's statewide, but it's being championed by the leaders here in Tucson, here in the city.
Wow.
So, like, for this, these are things that go silent when you're just looking at, because your state is doing stuff that other states aren't probably aware of, right? And so, unless we have people like you telling the rest of us who have, more reach and vote, but even just this show, we can't expose this kind of behavior if we are kept silent, right? So we have to speak up, and in numbers. And like, I hate that it's becoming police versus citizens, But also, I was reading the article we posted in the chat group, and it was all about like, I'm a bastard cop or something like that, or all cops are bad. I don't know. But it was like first-person account from a police officer being like, yeah, this is the shit. This is how they train us, which is like fear-based training to groom you to. Like, they start with just watching a bunch of videos of people killing cops. That's how they train you. You just flood them with, like, everyone wants to kill you. What? So it actually grooms them into needing to defend themselves. We are the enemies.
Yeah, they're trained to have an us versus them mentality. I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but here in America, yes, many police departments are trained, and it's come out like the training videos and stuff, that they are trained to have a us versus them mentality and view us as lesser because we are quote unquote criminals.
I'm not gonna lie, part of me wants to just go through the training just to see how horrific it is. Like an investigative journalism of sorts. I think we need stuff like that. We need people to feel safe enough to expose that kind of stuff, though. And that's scary,
So I'd like to bring us all together to say goodbye to Jessie, because I think we're going to want to do that. We're going to have to spend some time doing that.
Before we have to go, I just want to say, thank you so much for coming on, Jessie. I remember just before you came on, I watched one of your videos where you said you had you had a bunch of handwritten cards, and they said things like, "If you are a UBI advocate, I would love to talk to you." So I'm so happy we could all talk to you. If you would ever like to do your own Canadian UBI advocacy podcast, I'd be very happy to help you get set up with that. No pressure, of course, but if that's the thing you would like to do to meet more UBI advocates, I would do everything I can to help you with that, including setting up the technical aspect of it.
Funny you should mention that, because I'm working on that exact thing right now.
Well, good. So, if you need any help with the technical aspect or logistical aspects, we're here for you. I'm an audio technician myself, so whatever.
And we can also go on your show.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would love that. That would be fantastic.
Hey, we'll do that then. So that's a good place to leave it.
Let's have some follow-up conversations. I look forward to that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you so much for showing up today, Jessie. We had a little scheduling snafu last week, but we're so happy to have you back.
I'm really glad to be back. I'm sorry about the scheduling mix-up, and I don't know, I'm an anxious person and everything, but it worked in the end, and I'm just.
I just like to hear Canadians apologize. So. It's so musical.
Well, pitter patter, let's get at her.
Okay, there you go. More of that. I should end the show by nationally objectifying you, right?
Thank you for inviting her, Faye. Were you the one that connected us?
Yeah, well, she had connected with me because Scott Santons had actually shared something and was like, "Hey, talk to this chick," and I was like, "Okay."
She seems to be the Canadian Scott Santons. I would think. Is that right?
I think it might be the Canadian Scott Santons.
Wow. That's high honors from us. And Jeremy, as always, you did a great job producing and everything. And I just want to say goodbye to everyone. So do you guys want to still do your Twitter again before we leave so people can find Jessie, for example? Jessie, you want to start with how do people find you?
Yeah, so the social media is called Humans of Basic Income. There is a website coming, and it will be humansofbasicincome.com whenever it's done. But you can also find me. My Twitter handle is @humansbasic, just one word. So yeah, follow me there. I'm always sharing everything basic income. So yeah, cool. That's what I talk about these days.
Same here.
That sounds like all of us.
Yeah.
I'm at Palestine Math. Once again, I'm Faye Koo, and the other Faye is right here with me.
Hi. Yeah.
What's your Twitter, Faye?
Tisdonny, Tisdonny.
Very nice. How about you, Jacqueline? How do people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Jacqueline Homan, all one word, JacquelineHoman. You could find me all over the place, actually. Google me. I'm like horse shit. I get all over.
How about you, Jeremy? Are you ready to give us a last? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you to everybody for tuning in today. You can find me on Twitter at JeremySammons1, and that is JeremySammons and the number 1.
Okay, and Ariel?
Yeah, I think I said I'm at Ariel Ramada. That's at ARIELS_ARMADA Revolutionary Thinking on YouTube. And don't forget Ariels_Ariels on Instagram. So that's ARIELS_AERIALS. Come check it out for awesome drone photos.
All right, and so glad to see you were able to make it for a while, Angelo.
Thank you. You can find me on Twitter at Hellion Hellfire. I'd also like to thank our guest again for coming on the show. I hope that she will return in the future.
Would you like to pick her brains again for the, testify for Congress? You guys, you want to get your website out for everyone?
Yes, our website is testifyforubi.com. You can also find us on Twitter at testifyforubi.
Okay, and take it away, Shale, our ultimate
you, Faye.
producer that does all the
very
stuff
well
behind
done.
the scenes.
I do a thing here or there. I do a couple things. Yeah, thank you again. Everyone has said it for me. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Keep fighting the good fight. Stay safe. Take care of each other. Don't get sick. And we will be back with more basic income advocacy tomorrow. So, goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. See you next time.